this is Susan Billmaier, Dr. Suze with Evenstar Institute, and I am here with Vanessa Beltran, who is teaching our class, Nonviolent Communication. Welcome, Vanessa. Good to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Good. So you are teaching a class called Nonviolent Communication.
Mm-hmm.
So nonviolent communication, what if I don't think of myself as a violent communicator? Why should I take a class called Nonviolent Communication?
I think that maybe a more useful reframing would be compassionate communication and effective communication, because what we are seeking to do through this framework is to give people tools to navigate conflict and not just negotiate it, but also really transform it and really come out with something very different on the other side that builds upon like what both people are feeling, needing, and can request of each other to enrich their lives and well-being. And so I think that maybe, when we think of violence, it's more so just an ineffective way of asking for what you need that maybe leads to judgments or preconceived notions or, just blaming, finger pointing. Those are what we mean by violence. And instead we want to equip you with the ability to give a conscious response in the way that you express yourselves, and also respond consciously to what you are hearing and perceiving in the other person. Does that help? Is that a helpful distinction?
Yes, thank you. What I was thinking, kind of as you were talking, is the little thing I grew up with: sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And really, that's not true, is it? Because words can hurt, and hurting is a form of violence. And if words can hurt, and we can learn how that happens, because I would never mean to hurt somebody with my words, but it's very possible that just because I communicate in a different way than someone else, or I communicate ineffectively, or I say something that I think sounds perfectly reasonable but is like completely offensive to somebody else, but I might never know it. Like, those things matter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I wouldn't think of myself necessarily as someone who intentionally would do any harm, but maybe I just haven't learned what someone else needs, or how to listen appropriately to be able to be compassionate. Right? Does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah, I think that this framework is really based on the idea that all human beings have the capacity and also the desire for compassionate giving and receiving. But when we are not aware of our feelings or the needs that underlie those feelings, then we may just not be communicating effectively what it is that would satisfy those deeply rooted and deeply human, like deeply embodied needs for relationship, for mutuality, for participation, for belonging, all of these different, very human needs that we have. We may just not be communicating them in a way that will get our needs met. And we may, without, a lot of intention and consciousness, not be well equipped to perceive that in others as well. So it's a way in which like we often miss each other, despite our very, very best intentions.
Yeah.
But if we can really clarify our what's happening inside our own body and like inside our own mind and heart, and listen for what is happening inside of another person and speak to that directly, I think that we will be much better equipped to really grow and thrive in relationship, which I think that's really what this is all about.
Absolutely. That sounds, yeah. In relationship, because we are social creatures and we live in communities and we have other people all around us all the time. So
Yeah.
that's great. So I understand so you talked about the tools and the framework of nonviolent communication, and those tools and the framework have to do with observing what's going on, acknowledging and recognizing feelings, and then also kind of acknowledging or discovering or uncovering needs and values, and then being able to actually speak and verbalize something as a result of acknowledging the observations and the feelings and the needs and values. Is that right? And how does that all work together?
Sure. Yeah, those are the four parts of the framework, and I'll say that like the two guiding questions that I always use are, what feelings and needs am I hearing in myself and others? And then very importantly, what is my free and compassionate response? You know, whether it is what you are requesting or what another person is requesting of you, like what can you give that is free, that like considers you as well as it is considering the other person? Because that is a key part of, I think, transforming conflict, that it serves you both. And that it's, you know, not just necessarily give and take, win-win. It's definitely just completely reshaping it into
Mm-hmm.
something different that I think satisfies you both without necessarily that need for concession. I think it's a tool for transformation, not for negotiation or concession. But those four different parts are observation without evaluation. And so, you know, really just being able to speak to what your senses would tell you, what you are seeing, hearing, or touching that is affecting your well-being without any evaluation mixed in. Because a lot of times when you tell a story of like something that happened or the way that a conflict emerged, when any of that evaluation is thrown in, a lot of times you will go straight into defense or like into clarifying or into trying to reshape or like reframe what the other person saw, rather than just, you know, letting it be and being able to listen in like a really wholehearted way. And then taking that observation and trying to attach a feeling to it. And one of the worksheets that I'll provide participants is, on one hand, it'll have a list of feelings, you know, much more complex than just happy, sad. There's a whole array of feelings that you can have, as well as needs, because the main, I think, benefit, or like what I have found most beneficial about this framework, is being able to identify the feeling that came up in that narrative of observation and then attaching it to a need. So something specific that you are feeling, that you really would need to enrich your life in that moment. And so putting those together can be extraordinarily, you know, difficult if you haven't been really trained in like language of feeling, or if you haven't been trained in language of need. That can take a while. And I remember the first time that I was being trained on this framework, you know, thinking through my conflict and, you know, circling one, circling the other, and then trying to link them together was such a process for me. And I actually keep that worksheet handy because sometimes I still need to refer back and look at it. It's like, okay, what am I really feeling? And why am I feeling this way? What is the need that is going unmet? And go ahead.
That's fascinating, because I have a feeling worksheet that I've had for, let's just say, many years. And it was one of the transformative tools that I used because I used to be really emotionally shut down. And then I got this worksheet and learned like there's a language of feeling. So when you said language of feeling, I was like, oh yeah, I had to learn a language of feeling. And then what you just said was there's also a language of need. And now I'm like, wow, I have a whole new language that's going to correlate with my feelings. That's a language of need that's going to help me do something even more effectively to put the two together and be able to communicate more effectively. So I'm, yeah, that's really cool. It's like I need to learn the language of need now.
Yeah, Yeah, and you know, I think it's a ongoing process for me, and I think for most people, because you are ever changing, and like your needs, I think develop over time, especially as you understand yourself more. Um, yeah, and then the last piece of this framework is how to make a request, and the distinction being that a request is extremely different from a demand, right? Like when we think of a request, it's something that is specific and something that we are open to being fulfilled or not fulfilled, depending on like the bandwidth of the other person or like what is possible for them, versus a demand, which is, you know, leaves no room for negotiation, or which is almost like an ultimatum sometimes, like do this, or like the or is often explicit and carries consequence. And so we want to become more skilled in asking specifically for what we need in a way that involves the other person and what their capacity and ability is. And that can also be difficult, you know, a lot of times, even once you get skilled in identifying your feeling and then attaching it to a need, being able to tell someone exactly how they will be able to satisfy that need is a whole other process, and one that I think is really helpful to practice with other people. So like in doing a you know, a mock discussion, or you know, at a workshop where you can kind of practice it with other people, I have found to be very, very useful.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like even as you're talking and talking about expressing a need and sharing, making a request, there's a part of me that's going, I can't do that,
Hmm.
right? But
Yeah,
what I also love about the way you were describing it is it's a skill. I can learn any skill.
right.
I'm teachable,
Right.
right? And so, and just the fact that there's a framework that someone can learn that is a transformative process for communication. Uh, it just sounds like, wow, everybody in the whole culture needs this type of thing, right? I mean, to learn how to communicate and get along with people and just express and be ourselves naturally and easily without fear of repercussion or without fear of expression, without, and being able to just listen and communicate in a way that's compassionate, nonviolent. So,
Yeah, exactly.
all right. Well, any final words? Anything that you'd like to say that we didn't get into?
Um, yeah, I think that this is a great introduction and a great opportunity to learn this language alongside other people. But what is most exciting is, you know, that your life is your lab, and where you practice these things, and where you are able to see the difference that it can make in your relationship to others. And so in taking this workshop, my hope would be that your relationships to others will be strengthened, as well as your connection to yourself. And so, yeah, that would be my hope.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Vanessa. Again, this is Vanessa Beltran, who's teaching nonviolent communication at Evenstar Institute. You can check out this class as well as other classes at evenstarschalice.com/institute. And thank you, Vanessa. It's been a delightful pleasure to talk with you today.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.